Hello everyone, welcome back to DevToberFest 2023. This is week 4 of low code no code sessions. The topic for today's session is governance features for managing citizen development. I am very much looking forward to hear from our speakers Tarun and Amritansh from SAP on this topic. Attendees of this session may post their questions in the chat and get their questions answered during the session. Now, let's welcome Tarun and Amritansh.
All right. Hey, thanks, Srini, for the short intro. As Srini mentioned, we want to take you through, governance at SAP Build, our low-code, no-code platform. And I am Tarun, and I'm joined with my colleague Amritansh. We both are part of the product management team at SAP Build with a focus on providing a single entry point across the portfolio, and at the same time unifying the entire experience and enabling governance, which we believe is one of the key elements for a very broad adoption across for the low code no code platform as such. Right, with this short intro, let's move on, and I'll just take you through a couple of key aspects on why we believe governance is needed, and at the same time expressing how we at SAP are addressing this, and of course followed by demo and certain deep dives around what's coming up in the future as well. Right, to start off with, what we have learned over the course of the last few years is good governance and operations is essential for the success of any low code no code platform per se, because you have different thought processes out there. You have the IT organization which wants to really ensure that any app that is built is secure and compliant. They want to ensure that things work really as expected, and there are no issues as such, right? And if you think of from a low code developer point of view, of course he's got the freedom with the low code tools to build his apps, processes and automations, but he really wants an environment which is safe. He needs to know that he's doing it right, and some form of a guidance so that he doesn't get it wrong, right? So the intent is that even the low code developer is a key element out there, and he definitely needs support to ensure that he's doing the right thing, right? So looking at these elements and learning from our experience in the last couple of years, we've looked at how do we address governance broadly, and just want to highlight a few elements that we have delivered and we are working towards. To start off with, we introduced or supported the concept of a stage or an entire landscape. This is nothing new. This has been around for a period of time. But the intent here is that SAP Build now supports such a construct and a concept. And the whole notion here is, you enable governance via a multi-eyed principle. It gives more restricted access. It looks at different folks at different points in time looking into the app which is being developed, and validating it as well. But we'll come to the details in the subsequent slides, and you'll probably also get a better hang of it via the demo. As such, the second most important element was the introduction of environments. Of course, this is not yet delivered. It will be shortly delivered in Q4. And the whole intent is that you want to secure access to processes, automations, who can monitor, who can deploy, and where can they deploy. So the whole notion of who can execute processes and automations, having a security layer over and above what is out there, right? Lastly, one of the key elements also was around how do you prevent unintended usage of backends. So of course you have the whole dev test prod setup, which or the stage landscape, which prevent usage of specific backends. But you could also restrict it further by saying, okay, there are certain apps and processes can make use of backends, whereas others cannot. And the whole notion of how do you whitelist and or allow list destinations and map it to environments. Right. And lastly, we also have this intent of enabling configure approval flows at key stages in the project lifecycle. So when you want to govern creation, you want to govern, promotion or even transport of projects, you could, of course, focus on how do you want to have configurable approval flows, right? So the idea more is, the more folks look into it, they understand, the need for, certain questionnaires to be filled up, are elements that you would start to see. Right. But I think for today, I mean, we would spend a bit of the time from a demo point of view, focused on the stage landscape, followed by that a quick look at, environments, because this is coming very soon. And of course, for the latter half, I mean, it's more, I give you a construct and give you a thought process how we go about it. But we end when we'll end there. Right. And having said this, these are not the only elements. We wanted to focus things which are either delivered or coming really soon. But there are many more elements that we plan to enhance our governance story as such. Right. To just maybe dwell deep to what we mean by a stage landscape and how does it enable governance via multi-ite principle. Let's look at it from a perspective of we have a dev landscape or a dev tenant. And what does, let's say, a citizen developer do? So he's the predominant, let's say, actor in a dev tenant, and his whole goal is to build, deploy and validate, whether it be it processes, automations, or applications. So that's predominantly what he really wants to do. And while he's testing it out and deploying and working with these, processes or automations as such, he's connecting to dev backends, right? So he's not really connecting to test or production backends. And if he's satisfied with the results that he sees, or if he's provided access to a couple of folks to try it out, he can then decide to promote it and transport it across, to a different landscape as such, right? So then he decides to promote it, and it, let's say, lands up in the test system. And if you think of it, right, I mean, then you have a quality team member. So a different actor here whose prime job is to look at, okay, let's deploy and validate if it really meets the expectations that are out there. And naturally, when they're doing it, they connect to the test backends. And if naturally if the quality meets and everything seems fine, he or she then pushes it to uh, to the production landscape, right? And in the production landscape, if you see the two predominant actors out there are someone who's supporting the project in the sense of supporting the process or automation or application, and at the same time you have end users who are actually working on this or executing processes or launching these applications and addressing the issue as such. Right. So here naturally it's connecting to the production backends. And if you can see, if you have a a multi-tiered or a staged landscape as such, via dev test prod is what we recommend. Of course, you can have just a dev and a prod. I mean, just to keep it simple as well. But the whole intent is you have different, let's say actors playing, key roles at different points in time. So naturally, it gives a multi-eyed, focus on the project as such. And at the same time, you have segregations on which, systems you connect to, which backends you can work with. And hence, also you have access to users, right? So it's more users, it's backends, as well as the kind of people who are working on these different landscapes at different points in time, right? So hence, if you think through it, a stage or an end-tiered landscape, addresses this concern in a wonderful way. And this is one of the key elements that we believe would get us through it, right? And we quickly step into a demo, but just to let you know, there is definitely a one-time setup that is ideally needed to set up a staged landscape. Of course, the first step, if you think of it from SAP BTP point of view, you need to create sub accounts that represents your stage or an entire landscape. It could be 3 or 2, that denote the dev test prod or just a dev and prod setup. The second step is really, once you've created these sub accounts, you want to set up each sub account. In a sense, you want to assign the required entitlements, you want to subscribe to Build or other services, assign roles, connect to the required backends. So these are prime things that you would naturally do to set up each sub account as such. Of course, you could automate it using, different tools as part of PTP. And eventually you have set up, let's say, the cloud transport management, where you denote what is your dev test prod, how are they connected, how should information or projects flow from one to the other. And lastly, in Build, we have a classification mechanism where you classify the tenant or your sub-account to being whether it's a dev, test, or a prod. The whole intent is to prevent unintended usage, where in dev you can create projects. In test, you can't create; you can only test it out and deploy it. Similar restrictions in production as well. Right? So a simple four-step process. Once you have this in place, it's like a one-time setup, and you gain benefits of a governed landscape via a simple a simple process which is more across how whether it's S4 or any other system really works. Right. With this short introduction, I would hand it over to my colleague Amritansh, who will take you through a demo to better understand the situation and learn how this not only the setup but also the experience of the developer as such.
Thanks, sir. I'll share my screen. Hi, everyone. So what Tarun just spoke about here was the end-tiered landscape and how this could help you actually attain the minimum sort of governance in your development and production landscapes, right? So as Tarun already mentioned that the prerequisites of this being is that you have set up the sub accounts, you have enabled the SAP Build subscriptions. Also, you've created the subscription for the SAP Cloud Transport Management. Now I'll go through these three sub accounts which I have here: the dev showcase, the call showcase, and the showcase, which is the three equivalent for our dev, the test tenant, and the showcase one being the production tenant. Now, if I just step into the dev showcase tenant, just to validate what Tarun already spoke about, is that we have the subscriptions to SAP Build Process Automation and all the other applications as well in the Build portfolio, along with the subscription to the SAP Cloud Transport Management Service. If I just step into the SAP Build Process Automation and go through the existing set of projects, and also just to briefly talk about the tenant mode, which Tarun mentioned briefly about some in the slides. So this is the entry point for SAP Build, where we can go and create applications, processes, automations, and let's give this sorry, taking some time to load. Let me just see if I go to the other tenant.
You can now see it's actually a live system, so you get certain issues, but yeah, hopefully we can convey the whole concept to you guys.
I'll just pause sharing and then resume in a while. Give me a second. Works now. VPN issues. Okay, so as I was talking about, this is the entry page for SAP Build portfolio. Whether you subscribe to Build apps, Build process automations, this is where you get to. And as you can see, I already have this tenant configured as a dev tenant in my setup. So if I just go through the details, you can see that, okay, this is a development mode tenant, which I can use for deploying my processes, automations. And similarly, there are other tenants as well, which we've configured as the test tenant and the prod tenant, which we'll go through later in the demo. Now, if you want to change the mode of the tenant, you can simply step into the settings section here. And this will take you to the IT admins flow, wherein basically you can configure a tenant to be a dev tenant, a test tenant, or a prod tenant. And based on whatever configurations we do use, the users would be able to perform a set of actions or not perform a set of actions. And yeah, works now. Okay, this is killing me. Okay, so as we already talked about that, the processes, we basically want to test our processes in this landscape, right? So let's take example of this processes which process which I've just created from a template content from store. So what I've done is that I've just used this quick starter, or what we call as a template content, and created a project out of it from creating from template out of this project. And after creating a project, I have made certain modifications to this project, which means that I have to go through the whole release construct. And if you can see right now, I'm this on this version of 3.0.1. Let's try to make a further small change into this process and then deploy it in the dev landscape, basically to prove that, okay, as an developer or as a citizen developer, I step into the dev tenant, I create a process or I modify a process, I test those test those changes in the dev landscape. And once tested, then I can basically use the promote or SAP Cloud Transport Management to move the process further to a test or a prod tenant, where it can be tested maybe by the QA validators or the QA colleagues from the team. This is strange. Just log out and log in. Okay, so I think there's some issue with the system. So meanwhile, I'll talk about how we, as an IT admin, can configure the dev, test, and prod nodes in the cloud transport management system. So as you can see, we already have the subscription to the cloud transport management system in this dev tenant. And when I open the application, it takes me to the overview of the cloud transport management system. Here, what I've already done, I have created nodes which are equivalent to the dev, test, and prod sub accounts. And what these nodes basically do is that they point to, or they use the destinations in the sub account to get and forward the data or forward the content from one of the tenants to the other tenants. So this is the overview of the cloud transport management. And if I just click on access landscape, I would be able to see the landscape which I've already created for my processes as an IT admin. So if you see, there's this dev tenant, the development tenant, which we just saw here, and then these are the quality and the production tenants. Now, for the sake of this demo, what we've done is that we've created this landscape where data moves from the development tenant and to the quality tenant. And once we, let's say, validate the setup in the quality tenant, we can further move it to the production landscape. I've also configured the nodes to auto forward content from one node to the other, so that we do not have to manually push content from one to another if we have already moved it to the development landscape. Now, if I just go to the transport request here, we can actually look at the content which has already been moved from the dev tenant to the production tenant. This is the overview of how the content gets reflected in the cloud transport management dashboard. So if you see, I have moved the content, which is the 3.0.1 version, to the production landscape already. And if I just go towards the test landscape here, which is this one, yep. So this is the test landscape, which we just saw in the global accounts view. And here you can see that the content is already here. Now, how do you differentiate between a dev tenant and a test tenant, right? So if you go towards the tenant mode here in this landscape, it says this is in test mode, and we've provided a meaningful name and description so that even the contributors or the developers who are having access to the test tenant, they know that the end outcome of this exercise is that, okay, you can move content from dev to test and ensure that it works fine, which is in an environment very close to the production one. So here, if you can see, I've already deployed, sorry, I've already moved the content 3.0.1 here. Okay, I think the same issue has also affected this landscape. Now, just to go over also the production landscape, if you see that yeah, so this is the production tenant where if you see, there are lesser number of projects here as compared to the dev and test one, because only after the QA has validated all the changes in the test landscape, we allow the content to move to the production tenant, as against the multi-ite principle, which Tarun spoke about already. So if you look at the tenant mode here, it says production, and here we have like a set of guidelines which we want to recommend to the developers having access to the production tenant. It could either be developers, or it could also be a DevOps person in the team who's having access to the tenant. And again, we also give this option that if you want to look at more details of the tenant rules or the policies set up by the IT in the organization, you can use the link, where if you just click on the link, it takes you to the document. So what I've done is that if you see, this is the document that my supposed organization is using as an IT governance policy. So clicking on the link basically downloads the policy or the constraints that are there set up for the by the IT admin in the tenant, and the user should have a fair look on it before they actively start developing or deploying applications as a production tenant. So this is the difference between the dev, test, and prod tenant. One major difference is also that if you see that the creation of projects is only allowed in a tenant which is classified as dev, which means if I go to a test and a prod tenant, you should not be able to see these quick starters or the create option. Now, if I just step, so this is my test tenant where if you see there's no quick starters, there's no create button. The maximum that the user can do is import content which is already released or which has a version associated to which, and that is all that can be done in the the test and prod tenants, along with publishing or deploying the content to the public environment. Just let me try to refresh this once more. This time. Okay, no, then bad luck today. We're not able to uh, view the promote functionality, but I can just briefly talk about how this would work, right? So let's say this is the dev tenant where you have the content already and you've tested and deployed and tested in the dev tenant. So what you do get once you expand the versions drop down here is that you get a promote icon, which basically helps you move the content from the dev tenant to the cloud transport management system. Once you have promoted the content from the lobby or the build entry point, it comes and sits here in the transport request. So now these are some of the requests which are already completed. So what I'll do is I'll simply reset the state of these requests so that we can show how content moves from the dev tenant to the test tenant. Yeah. So I can see that there are some which are already succeeded. Yes. So this is one of the content which I just promoted yesterday, and the content basically comes and sits in the queue of the CTMS, which is the Cloud Transport Management System. Now, as an IT admin, what I do here is that let's say we follow a bi-weekly or a weekly deployment to the test and the production landscapes. So as soon as the developer promotes or pushes its content from the dev tenant to the CTMS, as an ID admin or maybe as a QA, I come here and I select this particular node and I get the option to import selected, right? I'm already in the quality tenant, the quality node in CTM, which means when I click on import selected, this content goes and sits in the quality tenant, which is here. Now, as soon as the content sits here, the QA who has access to the quality tenant can come here and basically deploy the application in the staging tenant or the test tenant, validate the changes, and then again request the IT admin to move the content further to the production node, which again can be done by following the same steps where you move to the production tenant here in the CTM, which is this node here. So if I just go to the production node, I will again be able to see the transport request here with the status in progress or awaiting approval. And as an IT admin, again, I can just select the content from the list and click on import selected, and the content would then again be it would go and sit into the production landscape. Now, once I make sure that everything is tested in dev and test as an a DevOps, I can basically get a go ahead and then deploy the application to the production landscape, pointing to the backend systems of production. So that is more or less the flow that an IT admin along with a citizen developer would use to promote content from dev, test, and pro. Yeah, Tarun, over to you.
All right. So yeah, let me probably just take you through a couple of things, and maybe just try to convey certain things that probably were missed out, probably because of system issues. So let me just share my screen. Right. So just to give you a sense, right? I mean, I think Amrithan's tried to convey this. So, this is actually one of the tenants that I use. So it's not the one which actually Amrithan is showing from. But the whole idea was that, if you have a project that you have worked on and developed it, so for example, this is my business partner A2X scenario that I worked with, I could decide to now promote it, right? So I've tested it out in my dev system. So all you do is by just click of an action called promote, the project move goes from, let's say, the dev to the test, or similarly from the test to the prod, right? So it's a simple action on promote, and let's say that the developer in this situation would click on this primarily because he's tested it and believes that it's now meant to go through. Now, that's one element that he wanted to really depict it, and because once it goes through the whole TMS flow as you saw, and it goes and sits in the respective tenant as such, right? And the important element is also, once you look at, I think we also stepped into something called as settings, where we configure the tenant details. So the whole idea is you can actually classify and express whether a specific tenant is actually dev or it's a test or a prod. If you see, there are some restrictions which apply to test and prod, but not to development. And the predominant action is that we don't allow changes in a test and a prod system, and that's the intent of preventing unintended usage, right? So that's one of the key elements. The second is also around destinations, as I expressed in the past. Naturally, if you're working on a specific tenant, you work with a specific set of destinations as such. And because this is my dev tenant, you would see that I'm working with a set of destinations which are predominantly from which point to the dev systems as such, right? So that's the model that's out there. And yeah, I mean, so that's, yeah, covers at least what we try to refer to in the deck that I had, predominantly of the different steps that are there, and how, let's say, the application or the project that flows from the dev to the test and the prod, and the different actors involved as such, right? With this, maybe a short view on the stage and the entire landscape, I want to just maybe spend a bit more time on the future and how we want to enhance it moving forward, and what elements do we want to bring in. So what we want to introduce is something called as environments. And if you think of environments, it is you can create one or more environments within the specific tenant that you are in, and you can reflect the purpose of this environment, right? So you could call this environment customer success, finance, HR, anything that you think makes relevance. But the whole intent is whatever is deployed into this environment shares a specific set of authorizations as such, right? So you can restrict, for example, if I deploy a set of automations or processes or app into this environment, you could have only those set of people who can monitor these processes. You could view logs which are sensitive in nature. You can also restrict who can deploy into it. So you might give access to some and not the others. You could link destinations to it. You could also look at who can execute rights, right? So it's not necessarily everyone can execute all processes or automations that are out there in a tenant, but only a specific group who could do it, right? So you could restrict access to a larger extent. And if you think of it, I mean, we have the section on environments. That you can come in and create environments. So you could create one or more environments. This is predominantly done by IT. And for every environment that you have, you would have, you could also deploy a specific set of projects into it, right? For example, there are projects that are deployed into this environment which share the same construct. For example, in customer success, they can share the same construct of, what we mentioned. For example, who can, monitor the processes that are deployed into this, who can view the specific logs, because these logs can be sensitive in nature, and you ideally want to give it to only those folks who are meant to debug and resolve issues. You could look at who can deploy and undeploy into the space, as well as who has execute rights on it, right? So think of it as a fine granular permission for a group of processes or automations are deployed into it as such, right? So this is what we would be introducing very shortly around this. And if you have happened to use robotic process automation from SAP in the past, you'll probably be familiar with this construct. And now we are evolving this to a construct which is process automation, as well as addresses certain needs of build apps as well, right? Following that, there are some interesting elements that we would, contribute towards from a governance point of view, with pure intent that the backends that we've got should be protected to a larger extent and used only in certain situations, right? So today, if you think of the environment or the model that we have today, you of course, if you are in a specific tenant, which is either a dev or a test, you use only those specific destinations. But we cannot give fine granular access to these destinations, right? So you want to ensure that these destinations, let's say if they connect to your success factor systems, are used only by specific applications and not by all applications, right? So or they're not used by all processes, right? So you could start to have fine granular permissions on these destinations as well, so that they only are used in a specific context for a specific purpose, and not for other use cases as such, right? And lastly, I mean, what we also want to introduce is more a configurable approval flow for specific stages in your project. If you think of it, you know, you you today you can just click an action. For example, I think Amrita should show it to you, but maybe just a quick view. So you could just happen to create your create a process. Let's say I want to create a process. You could directly happen to create it and hit the create button. But moving forward, what we wanted to do is have a governance process as part of it, so that you get more information about the project that one wants to create via a questionnaire, right? So it's just not the name and description which is sufficient. You might want to know to which systems does the user intend to connect to, what is the value proposition of what he's trying to create, so that you can also evaluate to understand if such similar applications do exist already, or similar projects do already exist, right? So that is one. In certain cases, you also want to govern the entire story around promotion as well, because yes, you want to give it like saying there's one click action called promote, and you can actually push it to test and prod with a lot of trust in the middle. But you want to have an approval flow where let's say I want to promote it. I have a questionnaire that I need to answer, which tells me, okay, can you share the security code scan results with me? Can you share results on the test results? How satisfied are users with the application, right? So because you should have tested it with a couple of folks before moving it out, so you can share those results. And when I look at this, let's say a reviewer reviews it, he's able to approve or reject it based on the response, right? So the whole idea is, get in configurable approvable, steps where, customers can, or IT departments and customers can decide whether they want to govern certain critical stages or not. And basically governing that would mean that it's a questionnaire that a user would need to answer, and it's just not like a single step as such, right? I mean, some of the feedbacks that we have really got across was, if you introduce many of these governance steps, is it not a burden for, let's say, citizen development as such? But not really. I mean, it also, if you think of it, it works like a more guiding force to look at, hey, what information is needed, and how does it also guide and help citizen developers to build apps, or processes, or even automations for that matter, that are compliant and secure, right? So that's the model that we would be going with. And yeah, we have a few stages which are covered today, as we did depict. And there are other areas that we will continue to work with, and we'll keep you updated on how we progress as such. Right. So with this, I've come to the end of what we really wanted to share today. I hope you could get a sense of where we are, and where we want to be. And yeah, we're open to anything that you might want to know and to learn. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Tarun and Amritansh, for this informative session on the governance topic. It is interesting to know the new features coming up in the future. There was one question on the chat asking, is it possible to save custom project as template? Is that feature available to save a custom project as a template?
I mean, you could always do a save as. So if you think of it, I mean, all you need to do is share such a project with probably all folks in your organization, and all they would need to do is just do a save as. So maybe quickly, I could just show this to you as well, so that it just helps. What do I mean by that? I think it's straightforward, but it requires some thought. Okay, so okay, I mean, this is already delivered, so you can start to use it as well. Just give me a second. Right. So let's say if you happen to share a project with me, I mean, you could, of course, share projects by, just say manage members and give access to folks. And you would have a capability to save as new. So for example, this is the governance approvals was a project that you wanted to make it as a template available for throughout the organization. You could, of course, share it with everyone. So what you would do first is you would just say that, hey, everyone access has view rights. You can actually save this. And once this is there, let's say now the new person comes in, logs in, he gets an option to save as new project. So he can, of course, to see gets a copy, but let's say governor approvals, and this is for Tarun, because that's how, and you can start to work with it. Right. So that's one model that you could, happen to use, which is quite straightforward as such.
Yeah, this is a nice feature. I like the collaborative, feature. Like we can create a project, export it, import it. Yeah, nice. Good to know. Yeah. Thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And I have an important note for the attendees. Please note that in order to earn points for today's session, you may want to complete the tutorial for this session. A link to the tutorial is in the chat as well as in the description below. Thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you at the next build session.